Okay, welcome everyone to the Empowered Jewish Living Podcast. This is a treat of treats, a true honor. We have on the podcast Rav Dov Ber Pinson. Welcome to the Empowered Jewish Living Podcast.
Thank you.
Quick bio of Rav Pinson. Rav Pinson is a world-renowned rabbi, scholar, author, teacher, and spiritual mentor. He has been hailed as one of the most important teachers of the generation and is widely recognized as one of the world's foremost authorities on authentic Jewish wisdom. Through his books, lectures, and seminars, he has touched and inspired the lives of thousands the world over and continues to serve as a mentor to many thousands of students across the globe. Rav Pinson has authored over 60 books, many of which have been translated into multiple languages: Hebrew, German, Spanish, Russian, and Portuguese. Rav Pinson is the Rosh Kollel of the Iyun Yeshiva Kollel and heads the Iyun Chabad Center in Brownstone, Brooklyn, New York. So it really is a great, great pleasure. Rav Pinson, if I can begin, number one, just commenting on 60 books and Svarim, which is incredible. I have read over the last few years, I've read Illuminated Sound. I've read The Inner Worlds of Jewish Prayer. And because we're coming up to Chanukah, we'll discuss a little bit of Eight Lights as well. And they've all made a very, very powerful effect on me. But I'm just going to ask it straight out. How have you written 60 books? That is such a tremendous accomplishment. It's so hard. Every single book is a world unto itself. And these are not light books. How do you do it?
I don't know, but I can tell you that they once asked the Chassam Sofer, there was a great master, a great teacher, great scholar, Moshe Sofer, that they once asked him when his friend once met him when he was older, and his friend who learned with him in the yeshiva asked him, you know, we both learned together in yeshiva, we both became rabbis, we both had similar paths, and you became the Chassam Sofer, a world-renowned person, teacher, and I'm a rabbi somewhere. What's the difference? I'm not comparing myself to Chassam Sofer. I'm just giving the story. And the Chassam Sofer said that the difference is the in-between times.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone spends a lot of time in the day learning and focusing, even people that want to write. But the trick is the in-between times when most people are just, I don't know, slacking off or doing things that are in between. To make sure you always focus, I think we have a lot more time in our day than we think we have.
Yeah.
So, to utilize the in-between times.
As somebody who writes and who's somewhat, connected to the world of writing and people that try to produce, I know that sometimes when a person sits down to write, like it's getting into the flow of writing that can be so difficult. So I think the hardest part of just jumping into writing in the in-between times, as you say, is that sometimes it just, it takes time to just ground yourself and open up your head to just get those ideas out on paper.
Yeah, it's not easy. I don't have an answer for this. I wish I could tell you exactly what the trick is.
That's what I wanted. I wanted the trick.
No, I don't have. I also, one of the things that I do is I learn through writing. So for me, the process of learning is always with a pen. So I'm always learning and writing simultaneously. Whatever I'm learning, it doesn't matter if I'm learning Gemara or Chassidus or Kabbalah, whatever I'm learning, I always have a pen in my hand. I'm probably writing on the margins or writing on a piece of paper. So it's always like it's always a relationship with writing. So therefore, after a while, when I have enough notes and an idea, I can just put it together and make it into a book.
Got it. No, that's a wonderful suggestion. If I could ask you, I read your bio. It's an incredible bio, but for me, I view you. I've listened to your classes on your website. I've read your books, and I just read your bio. But can you maybe take us into sort of your world a little bit more from like how you would describe what you do from your perspective? I would say, maybe you're someone that sits and writes all day, but apparently that's not your main thing because it sounds like you do that more on the side. So, can you take us into the world of Rav Dov Ber Pinson?
It's a good question. I do spend most of my time during the day learning. I do. I try to learn most of my time. I do is learning. I do other things. I meet with people and teach and etc. But most of my time I actually spend learning. One of the things that I want to do is to show there's a lot of unfortunately, I don't know, unfortunately, but I think it's unfortunately a lot of times people that are into Kabbalah or Chassidus or more the mystical and inner aspects of Yiddishkeit, Judaism, it's always separate from the Nigla, separate from the actual practice and separate from Gemara. It's like there's two separate things. And the Torah is really Chativa Achas. It's really one thing and it sparkles in different directions. And I think one of the things that I try to do is to show the entire pardes of the Torah, how they're interrelated, how the literal interpretation of the Torah, whether if it's exploring a particular mitzvah or a particular idea, to show how it's expressed in the world of the Gemara and Talmud, in the world of Halach, in the world of Jewish law, and in the Poskim, the way it's practiced, and then to explain it according to the Drush, according to the Remez, according to the more homiletical and even the secretive and the inner dimensions, to show how it's all expressing the same idea in different ways, and it completes itself. And you really cannot fully appreciate and even understand Kabbalah and the inner aspects of the Torah without actually having a good foundation of Nigla, of the revealed aspects of the Torah, and to understand them both and the consistency of all of them, to show them as one big picture.
Do you feel today that that's lacking, that there's sort of like these two separate schools? There's those that are quote unquote into Kabbalah or into Hasidus or into the mystical sides, but neglect the other side, and vice versa?
It seems to be this way. It seems to be this way because people, there's also two types of people generally in the world. There are people that are very right brain people, people that are very left brain people. People that are very left brain are very analytical and very intellectual and rational. People that are a little bit more right brain are more poetic and more imaginative. And generally, Kabbalah and Hasidus veers to the more right part of the brain of a person. It opens a person up, also opens up the nefesh of them, the person's soul and his consciousness. And left brain, if you're learning technically, learning a sugya, a complicated, piece of a Gemara on a Maitzim Chavera, like, technical issues, it's dealing more with the left part of the brain. And sometimes there are two types of people, and I think people veer to different directions according to their personality. But we really have to try to see it as one. We need the groundedness of halacha, of the actual practice, and we need the flavor that comes from Kabbalah. The Alter Rebbe the first Chabad Rebbe once explained this idea. It's like having meat and salt. Like you have the meat itself is like the bare bones of the practice, which is halacha, which is the world of law, and then you have the salt that makes the meat tasty. That if you don't have the salt, the meat is not tasty. But if you only eat the salt, then you don't have the meat, and then you don't have any substance. So to marry these two and to show them as one.
Yeah, I want to return to what you're saying shortly, because I feel like once we go down this road, it's going to be a long conversation, but I want to ask you one question first.
Yeah.
I have observed from following you for quite some time, everything that you do, I've seen it on the beautiful covers of your books, to the beautiful flyers that come out of the Ian Center, to your website, to everything. There always seems to be, I guess without any other ways, there's sort of a very cool, modern, very almost a trendy look that comes out of everything. I've even been in your space, actually. I've been in the Ian Center, and itself is a beautiful building. I know that you're probably not the graphic designer and you're probably not the architect either, but I cannot imagine that everything that's coming out from you, I'm sure that that direction is coming from you. So which makes me assume that you're trying to pull in a wider audience or something with the aesthetics, with the visuals. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I think, you say don't judge a book by its cover, but most people do. That's the nature of people. People see the superficial. But I think it's also to show the yoifi, the beauty of Yiddishkeit, that Judaism should be shown in its beauty. People have to think about Yiddishkeit as their own life. Certainly people that are interested, for coming from the outside, that people that have not been born into this or practicing, to look at Yiddishkeit and religious practice as something that's beautiful that will enhance their life. It's not something that's coming to make them smaller and make them, less of a person or less of a human being. But in fact, it's the opposite. The Yiddishkeit is supposed to enhance us and make us grow and become even better people and bigger people. So even appreciation for the art and for music and for the aesthetics, that a lot of times people, especially people that are Balei Tshuva, people that are coming back into the Jewish fold and Jewish practice, feel like they have to give those things up in order to practice Yiddishkeit. That they equate seriousness with like somberness. That I'm saying I'm serious, therefore I have to cry or I have to make But seriousness means that you're taking life seriously. That's what it means. And serious can be very lighthearted, and it should be. It should be. You should feel expansive and open. I think also the inclusion of aesthetics and beauty is a very important part of this. The Yiddishkeit has to be shown in its yofi and its beauty.
Yeah. So when the Pinson marketing team is sitting down, or the designers, and they're sitting down and they're asking ourselves, how can we get how do we get the cool factor that's going to attract the who is the Talmud, who is the student that it's looking to attract? Because again, I mean, this stuff, there's beauty, but there's also over here, I think there's a trendy and cool factor over here also.
I'm going to tell you the honest truth. I actually have nothing to do with any of that. So it's not really has to do with me. I think it happens to be that that some of my students that are people that are putting these things together, if to quote unquote, are cool. They have
got it.
They have this eye for the aesthetics, but I certainly appreciate that.
No, it really does. It adds very, very much to everything. Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back to what you spoke about before. We're talking about merging together. Right brain, we have left brain people, and left brain people view Judaism in the details,
right? And
might be more into like, what do I have to do? How do I properly observe halacha? How do I play by the rules?
Yeah.
And then you have a movement that was definitely, I don't know where the movement was before Hasidus came and accelerated it, but Hasidus came along, and with the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, definitely gave a whole new thrust to the right brain people. And definitely now, I mean, that seems to be the language of the younger generation very, very much. And your teachings, the first teachings that I ever heard of you, I think you were teaching the meditation of the Piasetzner Rebbe, and reading your books, especially the books on prayer, were very, very meditative. Mm-hmm. But I still think if you take a look at the overall picture of, let's just say, American Jewry, I maybe I can count on my fingers how many shuls, how many synagogues I've been into where I've actually felt the in atmosphere. And I grew up in Brooklyn, right. I grew up in Flatbush, where the atmosphere itself was inspiring. The meditative practices that you speak of, it's very hard for me to really believe that that's even close to being the mainstream. So if you would sort of look at how we are doing spiritual, how are we doing, not spiritually, but in regards to spirituality, how are we doing as the Jewish people, as American Jewry? Like, what's your assessment?
Yeah, I think your assessment is correct, but I think you're thinking about the past. So I think, which is a correct assumption. We always have to believe in a future. So there's you can measure time from you measure your present based on the past, or you can measure the present how it's being pulled into the future. So ultimately, we believe, and this is a part of the vision of Mashiach, is that everyone will come to recognize the oneness of Hashem, and everyone will live with the highest level of consciousness, the highest level of fakeness and unification with Hashem. So I believe the world is getting towards that direction. I think it is on the peripheral at this point. I think there are a lot of people on the outside that are entering Yiddishkeit and searching for those types of experiences, to have like an in-depth experience of Yiddishkeit. Means that when they daven, when they're praying to Hashem, they should actually feel Hashem's presence in a palpable way. They should feel that they're praying Hashem, that they're having a real dialogue, a real connection. I think certainly people that are searching, people that are coming from the outside, are searching for that. And I think, there's an interesting thing, like there's throughout Yiddishkeit, if you look through the bigger scheme of things throughout history, always after a major catastrophe in Judaism, like when Jews suffered very physically terribly, there was always a resurgence or like a reawakening of Kabbalistic and spiritual teachings. So if it's after the expulsion of Spain, so then you have the teachings of the Ari and the Ramak and all that, all the volume of the 1500s in Sfas, or after Chmielewski events and the terrible massacres of Tachvatat, it was the rise of the Baal Shem Tov. I think we're experiencing like a type of Holocaust, even though physically we did, just a few years back, we experienced it. But it's also a spiritual Holocaust, which is that there's a dearth of, there's like an emptiness of deep spiritual awakening. But I think it's awakening now. I think that's what's actually happening in the last 10, 20 years. We see a resurgence of a lot of even people within traditional, very frum people that were raised even from that turning towards Kabbalah, towards Chassidus. I don't know if you ever went to any Jewish bookstore today, like any frum bookstore today, if it's Beagleizer or any book, I'm sure there's one in Baltimore, you'll see. And probably over 50% of the books that are coming out now, the serious farm that are coming out are in Kabbalah, which is this has never happened in history. So I think there's definitely a resurgence of this, and eventually it's gonna affect every single shul in America, every single shul in the world.
So I've never davened at the Ian Center, but if let's say we started a shul and the shul was 10 to 15 Rav Pinsons.
Yeah.
What is that experience? What would be the main differences between that space? How would it feel? How would it look? What would that experience be like? Like what is the North Pole over here that we're trying to get to with the spiritual experience?
Listen, every person is gonna have to do it their own way. So it's not like there's not one model. But for example, wherever I daven, whether it's here or it's in Montebello or upstate, we don't have clocks in the shul, and no one has a watch. So I tell people when you come into shul, you're coming for, you don't know. It could be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or 5 hours, or 8 hours. Whatever how long it's going to take, as long as we're going to feel connected and it's going to be something real, you're going to spend time here. It's Shabbos. I'm giving you an example of Shabbos. So you come in, the ideal would be you learn in the morning, you learn some, I would say, learn chassidus, something that will inspire you, that your davening should be different. So you'll spend an hour, again, an hour, 2 hours, depends how long it goes. And then you just daven. It should be a real davening. Davening is that you should be heartfelt. It should be real. People should feel connected. No one should be rushing. No one's looking at the time. No one's trying to skip the words to get to the next place. The chazan will sing when he sings and not sing when he doesn't sing. And it should be a very contemplative and inspiring and passionate davening. I think that's the overarching idea. I don't know. It doesn't really matter how in specifics it works. Every person.
Are there any meditative, again, we're talking about now the shul that has 15 Rav Pinsons in there, or you understand what I'm saying. Would there be any specific meditative practices that would be woven into the actual prayer experience?
So in the Chabad tradition, tefillah itself, davening itself, there's something that the Alter Rebbe discusses, and later was brought up by the Mittler and his rabbis that followed, is an idea called Isbananus. And Isbananus is a meditative practice to be done during davening. So when you're davening, let's say you're saying Haidel Hashem Kir Vishmai, you would pause and you would do this slowly. You would say, what is Haidel? What does it mean to give thanks? What is thanks? How am I thankful? What is in my life that I'm thankful? So you're actually thinking every single word, not only the Kabbalistic meaning, which is also, but just even like personally, like what does these words mean to me? Hashem, when I say Hashem, what does it mean? What does Hashem mean? Hashem is a force that's outside me, within me. That's something I'm connected to. I'm not connected to. But so every word you say, that's contemplative davening, which is bonus. And therefore, in the Chabad tradition, in the real authentic Chabad tradition of davening, Shabbos, you can daven 6-7 hours davening. This is the way it was done. My grandfathers did this, all of them. They would sit and daven on Shabbos for 6-7 hours, and that's what they do. They would do every few words, stop, pause, think about it, and then go further.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people have the situation that people have a lot of ADHD, etc. To sit for 7 hours, but it should take a part of davening, even every single day, and make it real to you. Say today I'm going to focus on Baruch Shamar. Like, what does it mean that Hashem creates the world through sound? What does it mean, Ashrei, that I'm grateful and I'm what does these words mean? Haluka, I'm thanking you, Hashem. What does it mean to be thankful? So every day you pause a little bit and you make it inwards and you make it part of your life and relatable, not just abstract. You're saying about the Haluka Koichu, or that the stars are singing Hashem's praise. What does that mean to you? How do you see that in your life? How do you relate to this truth?
Would there ever be a place for any sort of, if you had to, you're painting the ideal situation, would there ever be a place for just that, for just a quiet hashkata, for just the quieting of the mind, for any place of just where people are sitting with eyes closed, not saying anything, not saying words, but just trying to get themselves to a state of spirituality, using meditation, using the breath? Would there be any place where you feel that the entire community, the entire congregation should be focusing on that to sort of get into the next phase?
Yeah, that could be done before davening. I think that would. I always tell people, especially on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, this is like important because a lot of people that go to Rosh Hashanah, even very firm people, and the Rosh Hashanah davening is 7 hours anyways. Like you come to shul, you're leaving 7 hours later. Is that it's more important than saying all the piyutim, which were added just for interest. I'm not talking about the actual davening, but the piyutim that were added, all the hymns and the poetry that were added in davening. Take that time and do ashkata. Like do it. Like you want to start Shemon Esrei, instead of saying the piyutim that comes or middle of Chazar Sashat, instead of before Shofar, actually practice ashkata. Practice his abundance. Practice those things that because you're sitting 6-7 hours anyways in shul. So make it real. On a Shabbos, it becomes a little more complicated because how much time do people want to spend? So I feel like just the fact that people know that they can come to shul and they're going to spend time there, and davening is going to be slower. You're going to learn something before, and you're going to think about it. Everyone's going to discuss this, and it's going to be something real. And you're going to daven with that inspiration of something that you learned, something that's inspiring. That will make the davening a little bit more meaningful.
So just to be clear, you think that there would be, again, if we can build, we're building a synagogue, we're trying to create the elite, the max spiritual experience possible. You would suggest that before any sort of davening begins, it would be good for a community as a whole to just sit and practice meditation, practice quieting the mind, and entering in from that place.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, there were shuls like this. Yeshivas HaMukabalim, they didn't do it different. They did it a little differently. They did Kavanah Sari, but that's what they actually did. There was a mechavan, there was someone that was practicing this intention. You want to call it meditation or intention, and the shul was focused on these kavanas. That when you're going to daven Rosh Hashanah, you're going to daven this siddur, you're going to think about these meditative names throughout the davening. So you're pausing. In let's say for example in the Rosh Hashanah siddur, you'll open up one page, you'll say Baruch Atah, and you have to leaf through 10 pages to get to the next word, which means you have to have all those intentions, and it's in a meditative state, and it's not cerebral, it's not intellectual. You have to. Rashash writes this, and all the Mukabbalim write. It's not an idea I'm meditating about. I'm thinking about a concept. You have to experience it. So you're talking about the world, the inner world of Atzilus, of unification. You have to experience what that is. So if you're doing this Rashash, you're going to have real deep meditative experiences, and then you're going to be able to daven from a deeper place. And that's the way it's practiced.
When we hear today about lots of things that people are doing to try to experience higher states of consciousness, let's just say anything from meditation, breath work, psychedelics, all these things. It seems like people are trying to get to that place of this transcendent experience. You point out, I think it's either in Illuminated Sound or Inner Worlds of Jewish Prayer, you point out that the whispering of Shemona Esrei, of the Amidah, which seems to be the peak experience of prayer, there's something about the whispering of it that is almost it's kind of grounding you, and it is keeping you in this world.
Right.
And I'm wondering if we're assuming that the Jewish prayer and our davening is meant to really climb the ladder to reach that peak spiritual experience, at what point is it supposed to happen? If it does seem, and I know you just mentioned about the different kavanos using the names of you mentioned the siddur of the Rashash, and maybe we just don't have that place. But in our structure, in our flow of prayer, At what point are we supposed to have that spiritual experience? It does seem that, again, even though the words are getting us someplace, but it does seem at some point they do hold us back, and maybe we just want to stop talking and stop using words and just allow ourselves and our minds to soar and get to that place.
That should happen. In other words, if you go through the stages of davening correctly, the stages of prayer, when you get to the Shemona Esrei, you should be in a place of total stillness without an ability to actually speak. You should come to a place of total silence, total innerness and stillness where you can't speak. You just collapse, which is like an ayin state. And then this is the maybe paradoxical, but this is really the essence of Jewish mysticism, is that you say Hashem Sefos Tifta, Hashem, open my mouth and let me say your prayer. Let me say these words of prayer. So the Maggid says, it's brought down in the Gra brings down also in the Siddur, that the idea is that the Shekhinah should speak through me. That I'm no longer an independent being that's speaking the words of prayer. I'm an instrument through which Hashem's light is being directed through me. But you can only reach that point when you're in total stillness, when there's a collapse of self, and then the self opens up to the expression, to be the instrument through which Hashem's light could flow into this world. So there's actually something that's almost paradoxical, but it's not grounding. It's transcendence and immanence simultaneously. So, but to be in that place of transcendence and immanence together, and holding that space, you first need to reach a point of total ayin. You have to get to the point when you say Shema
nullification,
of total nullification, and that actually, even the kavanas of the Shalah, that the intention when a person says Shema, when you say Echad one, is expiration. Like you should just be in a total expired state when you say Echad, which means I'm nothing, and then you almost have to be shaken out of that. How you will be shaken out of it doesn't matter. Maybe you take you an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe it take you 2 days. Doesn't matter. However the state is, and then when you come out of that state, that's when you start, drawing down and becoming this instrument. But the peak of davening, even if you see the way it's done, it's you start off that it's very loud, and they're standing. Then you sit down and it becomes more quieter, and then like Shema is even quieter than Psukim Zimmer. Psukim Zimmer is like singing or literally songs. So it's going to the quieter place, and then you come to the Shemona Esrei, which is supposed to be a place of total stillness. You're not supposed to. People think, I mean, of course, that's the way people think. You think that by the Amida, you're supposed to hold your feet together. Like that's a posture of restriction. It's actually the opposite. It's a posture of non-movement. You collapse that you can't move, and there's nowhere to go, and that's the body. You're not holding yourself back. There's nowhere to go. That's a cessation. So if you can get to that place in the Amida where you're going to experience that, you will experience this perfect stillness. And then you'll be
so just on that, because I know that I believe that the Baal Shem Tov and also Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, I think, speak about getting to a state where you sort of like your body stops moving and your lips, I think they even say your lips stop moving.
Correct.
And I do think that we find that if we are in a deep meditative state, like our knee-jerk reaction is to not want to talk. It's almost as if the words are sort of reverberating in your mind, but can you fulfill the obligations of prayer if it's now if suddenly everything moved into your mind and you are feeling stillness of the body and you don't desire anymore to move your lips because you are, in a little bit of a transcendent state, can you just stop talking?
For now, yeah. For that point, don't say anything. Don't do anything. Don't try to get out.
Just stay there.
Stay there until you start exiting that state, and then let the Amida that's flow through you. Don't try to push yourself out of that state. You see, if again, it's a time issue, because if you think I only have an hour to do this, and you're sitting in this, like, let's say in the state of ayin or the state of nullification or however level that is, you're always thinking, okay, but I got to do the Amida at some point, so I might as well like get on with the show. But the point is that no, don't do that. Like someone once told the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, that before davening, he gets into a very deep meditative state and a real sense of Achdus Hashem, the oneness of Hashem, and he really experienced it. And then when he davens, it's not the same thing. And the Rebbe Rashab told him in Yiddish, what do you care if you daven before you daven? Like, you did it, you got it. Okay, now you're doing the mitzvah of davening. It's a separate thing. There's the dveikus of davening, and there's the mitzvah in Torah to daven. There's two separate things, right? There's one is to feel the connection, and you made the connection, however you made that connection. And then there's an obligation to speak the words of prayer, two separate things.
So you're saying allow yourself to get to that place, stay there without moving forward
Correct.
in the actual service. And then once you feel that you're sort of, coming down, you're losing that
Correct.
place, then proceed.
Proceed. Correct.
I one of the things that excites me very much is when you start speaking about the Arba Yisodos, the four elements.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the four elements, and I have two books on the subject. I've had the privilege of publishing two books on it. I'm trying to find the themes throughout the stories of the Torah.
Connected to the Yesodus.
Exactly, yes. The first one is focused on the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, called the Four Elements of an Empowered Life, and seeing the early states of man and how they fell in the four elements, and how the patriarchs and matriarchs elevated that. And the second book focuses on the second book of the Torah and tying it into the four terms of redemption. And the idea now that I'm sort of playing with is trying to write a third book and focus that more on prayer. So I know that you speak in one of your books about how the different parts of prayer of the morning service specifically correspond to the Arba, so this to the four elements. I vaguely recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you also have a meditation specifically that focuses on concentrating on the different four elements to try to get to a higher place. Can you speak a little bit about the four elements and how you use it both in the context of prayer and also in the context of meditation?
Okay, that's a big question. It's a big topic, but I'll just say very quickly like this: that the four elements. By the way, did you see the Zohar in the beginning of Chayesar, where it talks about the four elements? Sar dying, Bikir Sabra, that's the four elements.
I did not.
Check it out. So it's a whole thing about that, about the four elements. Kiyas Abra, the four is the four elements.
Oh, wow, fascinating.
Connecting the four elements. But the idea of the four elements is both in terms of prayer, because davening is divided into four parts, and each part corresponds to another inner world, like the world of actualization, the world of formation, creation, and emanation, which is deeper senses of unity, feeling of separation of self versus unifying self and unifying with Hashem, with the Creator. So they also correspond to different elements. So you're also moving through the different elements as well to getting to a place of, fire, of leaping upwards, starting from earth and getting to a place of fire. There's also the Ramak speaks about in Shar Gvanim, he talks about Moshe Cordovero, also contemporary of the Ari, passed away a little before the Ari, speaks of this idea of that if a person wants to draw down a particular strength into a particular sphere, a particular energy within his life, they should imagine themselves either literally dressed in these colors, like he speaks about, like being in the color of white, which is symbolic of chesed, of kindness, or dressing in the color of red, which is symbolic of strength and gvura, and then, or imagining the name Yudke Vavke, the name of Hashem, written in red or seen in red. So part of that technique is also to really become embodied, certainly in a meditative state, is to actually sense those elements. So let's say you're trying to draw down gevura in your life, or strength and power. So in addition to maybe even dressing in red, which is interesting, but let's say you don't literally dress in red, but if you're meditating and imagine yourself walking into a room and you're seeing the letters of the name of Hashem written in red, if you add the dimension of fire to it, you actually could experience the heat of those letters. So, and if you really do this on a very deep level, you can even feel the heat, which is that you're entering into the name of Hashem and the heat and the passion of the name of Hashem. The same thing also would be done if let's say, let's say, water would be mine, which would be chesed. So you come into a place where you see there's like a dampness in the space, and you feel flowing waters or streams of water. Or the Ari speaks about like these carved ice mountains, carved like the names of Hashem. So it becomes like a very visceral experience. Because a lot of times when a person does any types of meditative experience, and certainly if they're visual, it's important that the experiences also are multifaceted and it touches every single dimension of self. It's not just in your mind you're experiencing it, but you should also feel like on a tactile level. So if you can add to the experience the senses through these tactile things like the Eish, Rochaf, the fire, wind, the earth, and water, to feel it in your body, the experience will be much more deep, much more deep. So
Wow.
that's a way to
Oh,
go on.
that's beautiful. That's fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, I see we don't have a lot of time. I want to jump in to Hanukkah, but also along the lines of what we've been speaking about. You mentioned before, again, right brain, and left brain as being something very grounded. It's halacha, it's Jewish law, it's probably Talmudic thinking. We have right brain that is a little bit more mystical, spiritual, perhaps. Can you speak? I wonder if Hanukkah, historically, Hanukkah in history, represents a bit of a transition that happened. On the one hand, within the world, within the not Jewish world, it seems that the Greeks, through their introducing philosophy, science, math, it seems that there was kind of an uptick on that sort of thinking in the world. And simultaneously, we have in the Jewish world, we're moving from prophecy, sort of like the last of the prophets before the era of the Greeks, moving into much more of a sort of Talmudic way of approaching Judaism. And I'm just curious if we could see sort of that, if there's some symbolism in Hanukkah of this transition in how humanity approached thinking about the world.
Yeah, I actually think you touched on a very interesting point, that the ancient world, especially the Greeks in the times of the Hanukkah story, is really the Greeks. When we talk about the Greeks and the negative influence of the Greeks on Judaism, or the contrast, is that the Greeks were, especially beginning with Aristotle in that time period, which is Shimon HaTzadik, that's a little bit the time period of the second Beis Hamikdash, second temple period, is when it turned from a more right brain understanding of the world, more prophetic, and there was more prophecy in the world, to very much empirical, very much like if you can see it actually, then it's real. If you can touch it actually, then it's real. And that's the beginning of the scientific revolution. I mean, that's the beginning of all sciences. Everything begins with Aristotle. And fascinatingly, the Greeks were also therefore very much into their bodies. The Greeks worshipped their body because that was what was observed. Instead of the soul, which is something that's the unseen, they worshipped the seen. And fascinatingly, the story of Hanukkah is about an image. Like Chazal say that the sages established the story of Hanukkah. How do we celebrate the story of Hanukkah? Is not through a celebration of a meal or a celebration of listening to a text, which is like on Purim, which is more shmiya, the shmoya, to hear the story of the Megillah, Krans Megillah, to read the story of the Megillah, to hear the story of the Megillah. But on Hanukkah, there's no mitzvah to hear the Megillah. Hanukkah, the mitzvah is to light a candle and lirois and bilvat, to see them. So the mitzvah is actually, the obligation is that you should see the candle. But the candle is a very interesting object to be used, because the candle, the flame of a candle, is the most ephemeral, transient image that you can look at, because the moment you look at a flame, it disappeared already, because a new flame is arising. That's one aspect of the flame. The other aspect of the flame is that it's always pointing upwards. It's always directing upwards. It's always transpiring and transcending in an upward movement, which means like this. In contrast to the Greeks, who worshiped the image in itself and the empirical image of itself, and said, okay, so prophecy is coming to a close. And Chazal explained that there's a very deep teachings that Gra speaks about this, is that once prophecy comes to a close, that's the end of all types of idol worshippers that did have some access to the powers of negative influences. So that world was being closed down, and now is going to turn into a more intellectual, which is the beginning of the Mishnah, the beginning of the Talmud, which is be another way to relate to Hashem through very much the strong left brain. Simultaneously, at that very juncture of history where there was a clash between the Messiavanim, between the Hellenized Jews and the traditional Jews, the Prushim, what was created was an image, which is a Hanukkah candle, a candle, but the candle itself is something that is non-tangible and always changing and always moving upwards, which Chazal in the brilliant way we're saying, indicating to us that maybe you're going to now move into a world where it's going to be where it's going to be, you're not going to have that same prophetic insight that you're going to have before. And maybe you're not going to be able to be prophets of old. And you're going to enter into the world that's more intellectual and more Talmudic. But you should remember that what you're seeing is not the ultimate reality. Everything is changing. Don't subscribe too much like the Greeks and say what is only true is what you'd actually see, because we're going to create a candle as a symbol for the transcendence of something that's higher. Here it is, and then it disappears. And that's really that's a mushal. That's a metaphor for all of life. The candle becomes a metaphor for life as Klal Yisrael is going into exile, and they're going into the world of the very foot on the ground. There's like a very real reality of exile. Say, yeah, but it's a candle. It's a wind. It's going to disappear soon. And what is the essence of the creation? The creation is really always desiring to go upwards, always to try to transcend. So there's actually a very deep correlation between the end of prophecy, the beginning of Greek philosophy, the beginning of Western civilization, and the image of Hanukkah. And fascinatingly, also, the symbol of Klal Yisrael, like the symbolic image that Klal Yisrael had throughout the years up until the Magen David, like in much earlier times, was the menorah. The menorah was the symbol of a Jew. The symbol of a Jew was a candle, was a flame, because that's what it represents. It represents that, yes, we're here, but we're actually transcending always.
It's such a powerful imagery. I know that you have to go 1 minute. Maybe you can let's just finish up. And this is beautiful ideas to think about, but practical advice. Speak to our listeners who are going to be lighting the menorah this Hanukkah. And what should we be thinking about? One piece of practical advice that will take our menorah lighting game up to the next level.
I think the first level is everything that we just spoke about. I think it's important, because we say in Haner Salala, we say that permission is given to see it, which means that we should see it. This is the mystical practice. It's what we say. Avoid is what many tzaddikim sit by the menorah and listen to the menorah. Rabbi Riyad says to listen to the menorah, to hear what the menorah is talking. So just a simple presence, just to light the candles instead of jumping to the next place. Take a chair and just look into the candle and look at the beauty of the flame. Allow your mind to just focus on the flame and the nature of the flame, that it's always changing, that life is always changing. Nothing is permanent. If you get stuck in your life, you say, oh, this is happening to me and that's happening to me. I can't see a way out. And God forbid things are happening to Yisrael, and you have to control the world. And no, things are changing. Look at life. Life is constantly changing. And then on a deeper level, see that everything is actually moving upwards. Everything is moving to the Olam HaYichud, the world of unification. And this is a metaphor of all of life. There's a tikkun that tzaddikim speak about, that if you can look at the candle long enough, you can actually heal all the seeing that you've seen throughout the entire year. Because throughout the entire year, we're taking all these impressions, all these sights that we see that are negative, and creates negative narratives in our mind, negative images in our mind, and we start feeling in the world. We start filling our minds with these negative thoughts, that therefore we feel negative about ourselves, negative about our environment, negative about the world, and less hopeful. And the menorah is a way to do a tikkun for that. Just to look at the candle, to sit and be present with the candle, will be a very healing experience, to recognize that things change, and this Eina Milvadi, Hashem is the only thing true in this world, and the world is always going to the place of yichud, the place of unification, to be one with Hashem.
Well, Rav Pinson, I'm holding on to your every word. This was phenomenal, beautiful. Could you end off? Give us a bracha.
Yes, Hashem should give us a bracha, and everyone of Klal Yisrael a bracha, that we should see Yeshua's v'nisim and real miracles. Time of Hanukkah, most throughout the year, we're not allowed to daven for miracles. I don't pray for miracles. But on Hanukkah, if a person forgets Ala Nisim, they say Harachamun Yasal Nisim. Obviously, no, that if a person forgets to say the prayers, they should say, "May the Merciful One give us Nisim," like it happened in times of old. It should happen today, which means on Hanukkah there's an ability to ask for miracles. So Hashem should show us all personal miracles in our own personal lives, and for all of Klal Yisrael, we should see Gedolos v'Yeshuas and the Chamas, all of Klal Yisrael, and the Gula Mitzvah Shleima.
Amen. Thank you, Rav Pinson.